Imagine losing 10 years of your life in a romance game that everyone had already dropped. And worse, he was a master at a character everyone swore was the most useless on the server. Then one day, out of nowhere, a glitched dragon appears, practically a walking congratulations. You lost everything with one teleport spell. Yes, teleport. He does the impossible, defeats the creature, and saves the entire game. Reward? Being sucked into the game in the skin of that failed avatar. Congratulations to the winner. Now he's trapped in a tutorial that 90 of players simply gave up on. His only advantage is being a veteran nerd with too much knowledge and too little power. He just wanted to stay quiet, away from the protagonists, away from trouble, and if possible, away from death. But no, fate looked at him and thought, it's him. Now with his hardcore gamer tips, he's gonna try to alter everyone's destiny. Leave a like and a comment, and subscribe to help us reach the goal of 20,000 subscribers. I'm counting on your support. The story begins by talking about Etherworld, a romance game that ended up full of men. In this game, there were several characters, from easy to difficult and useless ones. And among them all, there was one considered pure trash because of its absurd difficulty. Then we discover that some crazy guy played with him, Beck Usyol, for 10 years, and that guy is none other than our protagonist. He was chilling on his PC when he decided to check the forum for news. On the forum, people were panicking because a dragon had deleted the characters. The player gets confused. Why does a romance game have a final boss? He keeps reading and sees a famous ranker complaining that the boss is bugged. After reading everything, he becomes thoughtful, reflecting on this boss. He finds it strange that a monster nullifies magic in a magical world. It must be a bug. Then the dark demon dragon appears and he sees the story advancing. The game talks about a cult trying to help an entity dominate the world. And when the cult achieves its goal, the dark demon dragon appears. He's shocked that the continent was dominated, focused only on PvP, and turned into chaos. He thinks there's no way to avoid it, so he decides to try to face the beast. A system window asks if he wants to fight and he accepts immediately. With a determined look, he prepares to show 10 years of skill. Already inside the game, his character Beck Usyol faces the dragon. The protagonist thinks he's the only one who doesn't use magic, that's why no one plays him. Basically, his character is worse than a random background NPC, but he can use a bit of magic, actually only one spell. The dragon fires a massive purple beam and he prepares to face it head-on. He faces the danger focused, but soon a confident smile appears. Then it's revealed that his only spell is teleport, which dodges the attack. He reappears in the air in a combat pose, ready to continue the fight. Beck Usyol's teleport moves him 310 meters very quickly. The direction is random, so if not controlled properly, he dies on impact. Besides that, the cooldown and cost are absurd and there's an immobility penalty. However, despite all that, Beck Usyol completely mastered teleport. He now controls direction and distance and even nullified the skill's penalty. The skill doesn't consume mana because the character doesn't even have that attribute. He became obsessed because everything depended on his own skill. 10 years without magic. In the blink of an eye, he dodges the dragon's attacks and delivers the final blow. After the last move, he defeats the monster and the system confirms the victory. Back in his room, he's incredulous. Did he really kill the impossible dragon? He thinks that even with all the rare items, the character is still garbage. Satisfied, he decides to go to the forum to brag about killing the dragon. Suddenly an error appears saying the bad ending has been activated and 90 was destroyed. Another message warns that he got close to the true ending and he disintegrates. The system asks him to reach the true ending, but he goes into total panic. After a flash of light, he blacks out and wakes up somewhere else, terrified. He gets up from the stone floor, still dizzy and not understanding anything. Then he looks around the strange room, wondering where he is, until something catches his eye. He sees a mirror and drags himself toward it, shocked by what he sees in the reflection. Looking at himself, he realizes his appearance is that of Beck Usyol from the game. Suddenly a window pops up with the episode title, Escape the Pursuit. The protagonist instantly realizes it's the prologue mission, the character's first quest. He can't believe what's happening but reaches into his pocket and takes something out. Then he unfolds a paper and sees the admission certificate for the Stella Academy from the game. He gets nervous and starts sweating, finding it hard to believe what's happening. Then he panics as he confirms he's in Otherworld as Beck Usyol. He tries to stay calm and think logically, remembering the mysterious voice. Then he becomes thoughtful because the game doesn't have a true ending. Only several ones. Suddenly he has a spark of realization and a new possibility forms in his mind. He wonders if in 10 years no one managed to reach this true ending. Then he shakes his head. Now isn't the time to think about that, there are urgent problems. He forces his memory to recall what happens in the game and predict what's next. He remembers that the pursuers invade the cabin, and when he looks outside he sees them. The protagonist hides near the door, cursing when he realizes they've already arrived. The leader of the pursuers spots the cabin in the snow and warns his men. He orders the henchmen to search while Beck Usyol tenses up inside. Then he stays near the window thinking he won't be able to hide much longer. He clenches his fist in frustration, knowing he has no chance to fight them. The protagonist desperately wonders what to do when a system window appears. The window notifies him that he can use blink, leaving him completely shocked. The body doesn't accumulate mana, but blink was his only hope. He stares at the system window that confirms again that he can use blink. The screen shows the details: maximum distance of 9 meters and cooldown of 3 seconds. He gets worried. In the game he used the keyboard and mouse, but now it's different. The pursuers run through the snow quickly, approaching the cabin. He panics when he realizes the guys have already arrived. He sees there's no more time and, determined, decides to try something. With a crash, they break down the door but find no one inside. One of them spots Beck Usyol escaping and yells for everyone to chase him now. The group sets off in pursuit through the forest, shouting not to let him escape. While running desperately, he thinks that this is the first part of the tutorial. The mission is clear: he needs to dodge the pursuers using blink. He knows the pursuers are faster, only blink can save him. Beck Usyol tries to calm himself, remembering he has used blink countless times. Then he focuses, trusting that the skill's timing is burned into his memory. One of the pursuers is already right behind him, shouting for him to surrender now. He looks back and realizes in panic that the enemies have already caught up to him. If the user miscalculates the control of distance, he dies instantly. An enemy reaches him, shouting for him to die, swinging a killing blow. But Beck Usyol thinks it's different this time and activates blink at the last second. He uses perfect teleportation to dodge the attack, reappearing ahead. With a victorious smile, he celebrates having used the skill successfully. The others are shocked, wondering if he's a mage. The leader shouts not to hesitate. Blink paralyzes the user for 2 seconds. Then he becomes confused by his own words about blink's paralysis. And then he's stunned to see Beck Usyol already moving farther away. Beck Usyol focuses on escaping, thinking he must be more careful now. He knows he needs to use the uneven terrain to his advantage to move forward. It's revealed that 99% of players never passed this tutorial. Even the one who did couldn't master the distance in the countdown. Then Beck Usyol uses blink again, this time upward toward a cliff. The pursuers are stunned and the leader wonders if he's insane. The leader yells for the mages in the group to attack from a distance. 3 hooded mages step forward, preparing their purple spells. He looks back and realizes the mages are getting ready to cast their magic. Then the second part of the tutorial begins. Dodging magic arrows with blink. Beck Usyol thinks that in the game it was easier because he could see everything on the monitor. Suddenly a window warns that his mana leakage syndrome has been activated. With his eyes glowing, he can see the trajectory of the arrows coming toward him. He starts dodging amid the rain of arrows, moving with agility. The protagonist waits for the exact moment and prepares to use blink at the right time. Beck Usyol teleports away, narrowly escaping the explosion of arrows. He lands sliding on the snow, completing the maneuver without getting hurt. Then he looks back, relieved, thinking that was really close. After recovering, he already prepares to face the last part of the challenge. He's gasping and tired but remains focused on what he needs to do to survive. Then the system announces the third part, crossing a canyon using blink. The setting is a huge abyss with floating stone platforms in the air. He stands at the edge thinking the only way is to control blink's distance. Beck Usyol thinks that if he gets through this hell, find some mages and the tutorial will end. He analyzes the path and sees about 20 floating stones to cross with blink. The protagonist knows that canceling the skill in 0.1 seconds is much harder in practice. He becomes furious, mentally cursing whoever created such an impossible tutorial. However, he takes a deep breath and concludes that this part of the challenge is actually doable. But he realizes that the real problem is right in front of him now. The pursuers finally arrive and spot him at the edge of the cliff. He notices the enemies are closer than he expected, which complicates everything. The distance is 100 meters, and with a 3-second cooldown there's no time to escape. Beck Usyol clenches his fist and thinks about the most likely method to survive this. With a cold and determined look, he decides that the only way out is to kill them all. He sits near a tree to prepare himself as the cold wind blows. The protagonist thinks it's madness since he's never been in a real fight. He reflects that if this were a game, the system wouldn't let him attack the pursuers. Beck Usyol thinks there's no rule forcing him to follow the system blindly. He thinks that the idea of killing someone doesn't bother him, it's not about the enemies. Then he prepares to fight. The real reason is that he believes he can win. Beck Usyol stands up and faces the group, who are surprised to see him standing there. The leader points angrily and shouts that it's him, the target they were looking for. The leader orders them to grab the kid and one advances, mocking him for fighting alone. The pursuer says he's done for, but the protagonist just gives a confident smirk. He calculates the distance, activates blink, and teleports right in front of the shocked enemy. The group leader is left speechless, stammering in surprise at what just happened. The protagonist appears right next to the enemy with a cold look and a dagger at the man's neck. The pursuer starts coughing up blood with no time to react to the surprise attack. The protagonist feels the blood on his fingers but feels no guilt for what he has done. He steps away from the body thinking that, after all, he only killed to survive that situation. The protagonist takes advantage of the confusion and uses the body as momentum to attack the rest. He throws one of the guys into the middle of the group, knocking several down with the impact. The pursuers become furious, but he takes the opening to escape again. The leader shouts not to let him get away while he keeps running through the snow. Beck Usyol thinks he already took care of one, but knows the next attack won't be easy. Suddenly he notices a strange silence. Could the pursuers have given up? But then he realizes they haven't. They're casting magic again with full force. He missteps and slips, cursing himself for getting careless right now. The mages take advantage and prepare a magic circle of fire. They unleash a giant fire spell and he screams in pain from the explosion. A rain of fireballs falls on him, making it impossible to escape. He grits his teeth and complains about how their magic is too strong. Then he spots a crack in an ice wall that might be his only chance. With a determined look, he prepares to use blink again. He teleports just in time to escape, leaving only smoke and destruction behind. One of the mages smirks, thinking it serves him right for a lesson learned. He looks at the crater left by the spell but sees no sign of Beck Usyol's body. The mage is surprised not to see the body, and we see the protagonist heading toward him. Seeing the attack, the mage stares in shock and he thinks about a peculiarity of blink. He rushes forward with all his strength, thinking that blink preserves momentum before and after. Then he activates blink and crashes into the mage with a violent impact. The other pursuers freeze, not understanding what the hell just happened. The struck mage can't believe what just happened to him. The leader is stunned by the speed and strategy of the boys' surprise attack. Beck Usyol stands there panting with the enemy's body lying beside him. He looks at the two remaining, thinking that now only they are left to finish. With a determined look, he thinks he needs to end this before the others arrive. The leader finds the boy strange. His reaction speed is far too abnormal. He stares at the protagonist, who wipes off the blood and asks who he really is. The protagonist thinks that his reaction time is faster than pro players, but only in games. He knows he can't dodge forever, so he decides to end the fight quickly. The leader smiles confidently, saying he's already figured out the style and is ready to strike back. He realizes that Beck Usyol only uses blink and the dagger and thinks he knows how to counter it. The leader believes that if he protects his face and neck, the dagger won't even scratch him. The pursuer positions himself to fight, staring with his sword ready. He yells for the protagonist to come, already launching a wave of ice with his sword. Beck Usyol activates Blink, immediately preparing to dodge and counterattack. The leader smirks, thinking he caught him and will now make him suffer. Suddenly he hears a groan of pain and can't believe what he's seeing. He's shocked to see that the protagonist used Blink to attack his companion instead. The leader becomes enraged, cursing him for running before and now fighting. The protagonist, with the enemy's body behind him, confirms that before he was only running. He gives a small smirk and thanks the leader for helping him get better at the fight. The leader becomes furious, saying they went easy on him and now things will get serious. He charges with his sword, shouting that this time he'll kill him without mercy. The protagonist defends himself with the spear he grabbed, saying he won't let him. The leader smiles, thinking he just needs to keep attacking while the boys close. He realizes that the protagonist used Blink to counterattack. He lured him on purpose. The leader lunges with his sword to deliver the final blow and end the fight. His eyes go wide in total confusion. He's no longer in front of him. With a look of pure panic, he realizes there's no way he could have vanished like that. The protagonist strikes with full force and the system announces that the first episode is over. The protagonist collapses, exhausted, as the system notifies that he earned EXP and rewards. He lies there in the snow, panting and wounded, trying to catch his breath. He looks at the blood-stained dagger in his hand, still processing everything that happened. The protagonist stares at the fallen enemies' bodies with the snow stained red with blood. He reflects on everything that happened: his first Blink, the battle, and his first kill. He stares at his trembling hands, accepting that he killed to survive. Beck Usyol breathes in relief in the snow, deciding it's best to leave for now. He starts walking away but stops when he remembers something important and turns around. He thinks that despite the bitter feeling, he needs to be realistic and search the body. Then he finds a pouch with about 2 million credits, which is better than nothing. Now, with the money, he thinks about the next problem while observing his surroundings. He reaches the edge of the abyss, realizing he needs to find a way to cross it somehow. He hears shouting and spots a group on the other side, recognizing the mages from the tutorial. He shouts that he's there, and when they ask if he can cross, he confirms that he can. One of the mages tells the others to wait, since the boy said he was going to cross. Another mage doubts it, saying that to cross he'd need to be a third-class knight. The mage suddenly looks surprised, unable to believe what he's seeing on the other side. Suddenly Beck Usyol starts using Blink to jump between the stones, shocking the mages. He lands perfectly on a platform, focused on continuing the crossing of the abyss. The group of mages watches him jump, wondering what kind of jump spell that was. One of the hooded mages recognizes the skill and says that it's a Blink. A girl with blue hair and shining eyes appears in the group, observing seriously. The other mage doubts it, saying that Blink doesn't control direction and distance like that. While they argue, Beck Usyol keeps crossing with absurd precision. The mage spots the 2 remaining pursuers and asks if they're with the boy. Then it dawns on him, and he's shocked, realizing the true situation. One of the mages from the enemy group is already preparing, casting a fire magic circle. The mage launches a giant blast of fire and Beck Usyol activates Blink to escape. He manages to dodge just barely, reappearing on another platform as the fire explodes. He becomes worried, wondering if they're from the same group as the mercenary from before. He knows Blink's cooldown is 3 seconds, so he can't dodge everything. That's why he needs to find the next floating stone to continue the crossing. Suddenly, one of the pursuers casts a purple shadow spell. Catching him off guard, the spell almost hits him directly, but he manages to dodge it. He loses balance and starts falling into the abyss, thinking desperately that he's going to drop. As he falls, he sees the stones far away but hopes to land on at least one of them. At the last second, he activates Blink, teleporting to the edge of a cliff. He celebrates having survived but quickly sees a giant fire spell coming his way. He already accepts that he's going to die, but out of nowhere a blue ice spell blocks the attack. The 2 spells collide in a massive explosion, with shards of ice and fire scattering through the air. After the explosion, everything becomes calmer with ice crystals floating in the air. Clinging to the rock, he wonders what kind of spell that was. A lance of ice mixed with lightning. He's shocked that someone used 2 attributes without even chanting a spell. The other mages are terrified by the girl's power, thinking what she did is impossible. Seeing that they couldn't kill the protagonist, the mages turn their backs and leave. Exhausted, he hangs from the edge, thinking in relief that it seems he survived. After recovering, he finally joins the group of mages who were watching him. He goes straight to the girl with blue hair and thanks her for helping him in the fight. She replies that she didn't do it to receive gratitude and walks away, leaving him embarrassed. He thinks she has the most beautiful voice he's ever heard, but she seems hard to approach. Then he changes the subject and starts thinking about the men who were chasing him. It's explained that they're bandits who raid nearby villages, terrorizing the region. But in truth, they're members of the dark demon cult, and now that he escaped, they won't chase him. He feels more at ease thinking that they don't even know who he really is, which is good. Suddenly, while he's deep in thought, a system window appears in front of him. The window announces the beginning of episode 2, the mission to enroll at Stella Academy. He stares at the window, wondering if this is the second episode, thinking it won't be difficult. But then he panics as he remembers Stella Academy. How is he going to endure school again? The scene shifts to a carriage traveling alone through a snowy landscape at night. Inside the carriage, Beck Usyol is sleeping awkwardly, mumbling as he has a nightmare. Then he begins dreaming of his past, seeing himself much younger, calling for his mother. In the dream, he tells his mother that he'll become a mage when he grows up, and she believes in him completely. He remembers a magic book his parents worked hard to buy for him. He promised himself he would study a lot to make his parents happy and proud. His mother finds him asleep on top of the books and gently covers him with a blanket. But the dream suddenly changes, and now his mother appears worried, calling a doctor. In the dream, his mother asks the doctor if her son has MANHWA leakage syndrome. Young Beck Usyol is in shock, thinking there's no way that could be true. The protagonist wonders if these are the memories of the original Beck Usyol or something else. Then the child in the dream starts crying desperately, his face red and covered in tears. He wakes up from the nightmare in a fright, questioning if those were his own memories. Still dizzy, he sits up in the carriage with his hand on his head, recovering from the bad dream. He looks out the window and sees the sun rising over the snowy mountains. It's already morning. One of the mages sees he's awake and says they're almost arriving in Leakage, the satellite city. The carriage stops in the middle of the snow, and the mage tells everyone they'll take a break there. Beck Usyol steps out of the carriage and stretches, looking at the improvised camp. He notices the girl with blue hair and is surprised she walks away in silence, and he finds her attitude quite cold. But he thinks things are going well and feels glad that the world is modern. In Otherworld, there are trains and flying ships for long-distance travel. He thinks they're heading to Leakage to catch a flying ship and continue the journey. Arcanium is the center of magic, with 5 academies including Stella. Stella is full of geniuses, and he doesn't understand how Beck Usyol managed to get in. He remembers something important and realizes he hasn't checked his abilities. Then he opens the window and sees the details of the MANHWA leakage syndrome. This syndrome prevents him from accumulating mana, according to the diagnosis. He thinks that this curse is something the original Beck Usyol had since birth. The syndrome allows him to sense mana and detect attacks coming his way. He concludes it's a necessary skill but consumes too much mental power and checks the status. He opens the status window and sees that the attributes aren't that bad. He realizes the body inherited part of the stats from the 10-year-old character. In Otherworld, stats use stars and skills use levels. The maximum level is 9 stars, but he only reached 8 in 2 attributes. He decides to invest in sensitivity to improve his sixth sense and reaction time. With a tap on the screen, he increases sensitivity, the rest he'll train later. Now the problem is the syndrome, and he needs to evolve it to survive. The way to improve the syndrome is at Stella Academy, so he must go there. He sighs, discouraged about going back to school, and wishes for something to help. A notification appears warning him about missed messages he hasn't seen. A mage calls for him to continue and Beck Usyol replies that he's coming. He decides to check the notifications later and follows the group through the snow. The girl with blue hair silently watches a massive flying ship. On the ship, an officer announces the departure to Arcanium and asks everyone to take their seats. An arrogant noble looks to the side with a disdainful expression. He mocks Beck Usyol, saying he looks like a lost country bumpkin. The protagonist hears the comment while the noble complains about Stella. The noble says Stella demeans itself by accepting people from lower classes. The protagonist stares at the group in silence and lets out a sigh of boredom. He thinks kids are all the same, but the noble gets irritated by the sigh. The noble becomes furious at his audacity and curses him mentally for the disrespect. He orders Beck Usyol to stop while the people around watch. He complains about the noise, but his eyes fix on something behind him. He's surprised to see a girl with white hair approaching. Beck Usyol recognizes Princess Bien upon hearing someone call her name. She is Hongbin Adalat and walks past the group with an aura of royalty. The arrogant noble stammers as he greets the princess, changing his attitude immediately. The princess gives him a cold glare, and the noble nearly soils himself with fear. She simply ignores him and keeps walking, leaving him speechless. The group of nobles stands frozen, not knowing what to do, embarrassed. The princess walks past Beck Usyol without even glancing at him. He looks at her and thinks she's the great villain of the game. Hongbin is a main character who fights with the protagonist and dies. No matter the route, she always meets a tragic or painful end. Feeling hungry, he walks away to grab something to eat. When he picks up a drink, he's shocked by the steep price. He complains that everything is expensive and decides to eat only in Arcanium. An announcement echoes through the ship, catching Beck Usyl's attention. A female voice makes an announcement to all passengers. The voice informs that they'll arrive in 10 minutes while the girl reads a book. She asks all passengers to prepare for disembarkation on the first floor. The announcement repeats, emphasizing the time left to reach the final destination. Beck Usyol smiles, wondering if things are truly beginning now. He gives a small determined smile, thinking this is his reality. Then he folds his arms with a shadowed expression of concern. He sighs, having already come to terms with the situation, though still tense. Beck Usyol wonders if he'll be able to survive at Stella Academy. He remembers the notification he still hadn't checked to see what it was. The system offers him a reward and he praises their commercial ethics. The protagonist tries to claim a strong item, but the system warns that the level is too high. He tries for the hyperspace blink, but the system denies it, leaving him irritated. He's missing narrative power, a force that accumulates by exploring routes. Beck Usyol understands he can't claim endgame items because he's still a novice. He tries requesting the bulbul glasses and the system finally agrees. Then he accepts the reward and the blue glasses materialize in his hand. The bulbul glasses store all the information he wouldn't be able to remember. Since memorizing everything in the game was hard, players created this item. He puts on the glasses, smiling, since he also crafted that item in the game. Then he gives the command to open the information folder in the system window. There he sees the categories of information and finds them sufficient to get by. He thinks that with the glasses he'll recover half of his former skill. Suddenly, he hears whispers and wonders if that's really Ezel. They say she's the daughter of the traitor Dutchmalf, making the atmosphere tense. People whisper about how she dares to show her face there. Beck Usyol realizes that Ezel is the same girl who helped him on the cliff. He decides to use the glasses to check her characteristics. Then he discovers that Ezel is an ice mage and the false heroine. The protagonist watches Ezel walk away and wonders how to explain who she is. Otherworld is based on the romance novel Do Not Love the Princess. The novel tells the story of Ezel facing the villain Hongbin. But the problem is that the game story is completely different from the novel. In the game, the character Flame was added and took Ezel's place. Flame was a woman from the modern world transported to be the protagonist. Because of that, Ezel became the false heroine in the game and never survived. He removes the glasses and thinks that this has nothing to do with him. But he's left with a nagging feeling, wondering about something. Beck Usyol feels he's seen Usyol somewhere before, a strange sensation. He decides it must be his imagination and that it's better to prepare to disembark. The scene shifts to Stella Academy, showing its facade and fountain. Students in elegant uniforms gather for the ceremony. An elderly man gives a speech, saying the situation is serious. Demonic humans are invading the world, and mages must protect everyone. Two students complain among the crowd, finding the speech boring. The headmaster announces the oath of the 4 students with the highest grades. He calls them to the podium, and the princess steps onto the stage with the others. The 4 distinguished students have noble appearances and heroic auras. Beck Usyol watches from afar, thinking their faces seem to shine. But he thinks that the brightest among them is one special person. The headmaster announces MANHWA, the representative with the highest score. Beck Usyol sees the famous MANHWA, the Academy's prodigy. MANHWA is a natural genius who controls all elements. To avoid bad endings, he needs to bring MANHWA to the side of good. However, he knows that task belongs to the true heroine. He looks at Flame, the brown-haired girl, trusting her. He decides it would be good to get along with her since they come from the same reality. But he knows that if she sees him as an enemy, things will get complicated. While a student recites the oath, he thinks his own importance is minimal. The heroine purifies demons but also drains the luck of those around her. Therefore he knows that staying close to her will affect him negatively. He decides his role is to support the protagonist from afar. With a determined look he concludes that the best choice is not to get involved. The headmaster ends the ceremony, and the students applaud enthusiastically. The system announces the end of episode 2, showing the Academy's castle. In the classroom he finds it strange to be a student again after so long. But he takes out his golden pocket watch and feels satisfied. The Stella pocket watch proves that he's a student of the Academy. He feels excited, wanting to use the watch soon and go out for a bit. The teacher enters the room and tells everyone to sit in their seats. He announces that the exams are about to begin. Surprising Beck Usyol, Stella's curriculum is stricter than that of many universities. The teacher begins the class placement exam right away. Beck Usyol understands nothing and finds the test extremely difficult. The exam is famous for dividing students into classes from F to S. Most playable characters, like the princess, end up in Class S. Beck Usyol, who entered last, will fall into Class F if he doesn't answer. Meanwhile, another student seems calm despite the test's difficulty. And the genius Mei Yuziong is there sighing, finding it all completely tedious. The protagonist notices that the genius already has his usual expression. He looks at the exam and realizes Mei Yuziong has already finished everything. Beck Usyol thinks it's no wonder life is boring for Mei Yuziong. It's explained that his nature is boredom since he was born into the strongest family and everything comes too easily. Because of that, depending on the heroine, his fate can be good or bad, and the demonic humans have their eyes on him. And of course the demonic humans would have great interest in Mei Yuziong. But the protagonist thinks his biggest problem to begin with is his own family. Looking at his own test, he thinks that looking at geniuses only makes him compare himself even more. Then he has a spark of an idea, wondering if he can use the bulbul glasses to help with the test. He decides he has nothing to lose, so he chooses to test the idea. But the teacher suddenly appears and asks what kind of glasses those are, catching Beck Usyol off guard. The teacher reminds him that he had said to check any item beforehand, and Beck Usyol recalls the rule. Then the teacher takes the glasses to examine them, analyzing the item carefully. Beck Usyol panics, thinking that if they discover the magic in the glasses he might be expelled. Suddenly he hears a strange sound. The system alerts that it detected a missing component in the glasses and asks if he'd like to equip it. The teacher keeps examining the magical item. But he returns the glasses, saying he didn't feel any mana and that next time Beck Usyol should inform him first. Relieved, Beck Usyol puts the glasses on and gets ready. With that, the test answers appear magically, leaving him shocked by the result. He gives a small smile, thinking he just hit the jackpot and might even get first place. With that he starts writing, certain that he'll escape Class F and maybe even reach Class A. But suddenly the teacher announces that the exam is over, leaving Beck Usyol completely shocked. The tests start flying on their own across the classroom, and he still doesn't understand what's happening. Seeing the papers floating away, he panics, realizing he only managed to answer 3 questions. The teacher collects the exams and analyzes them with a very serious expression on his face. Beck Usyol feels disappointed, thinking he thought he would escape Class F, but it was too much for him. Suddenly, he hears a noise and becomes confused. The teacher yells at him to hand over the glasses immediately, leaving the boy clueless about the order. Then he grabs the glasses again, thinking that no, that can't be possible. The teacher orders the student to go call Dr. Grayhan right away, and the boy obeys immediately. Beck Usyol is confused, thinking he wrote everything carefully so they wouldn't think he was cheating. The scene changes and the teacher asks Dr. Grayhan what he thinks. While the man analyzes the glasses attentively, the teacher finds it suspicious that he solved the question. But the doctor confirms that he didn't cheat since there's no magic in the items. The doctor concludes that the boy solved everything on his own, leaving the teacher surprised. Dr. Grayhan finds it all fascinating and tells the teacher to apologize, which he reluctantly agrees to do. The teacher admits it was a misunderstanding and formally apologizes to Beck Usyol. He thinks that he actually did cheat but says it's fine, relieved he didn't get caught red-handed. The scene shifts to the teacher's office where he's sitting and reading some papers attentively. He analyzes Beck Usyl's exam, focusing on the first question circled in red. He keeps examining the test with a thoughtful expression. Suddenly a voice calls his name, Lee Hanwol. A female teacher asks if those are the freshmen's exams, and he confirms they are. Professor Adaltiman comments excitedly that she heard there are many interesting freshmen this year. He replies awkwardly, saying apparently there are. Then the elite students are shown, like the Princess Timothy and the successor of the Winriang family. She comments that it was hard to make the test for so many elite students, but that the questions were interesting. He responds that he's glad she liked it, but his expression remains serious. It's explained that this year's test had a new type of question, and the first 3 were hard to solve. The intention was to test flexibility and the ability to handle new problems. The teacher thinks that the era of memorizing magic is over, and now the focus is on creative thinking in combat. Thinking that the questions weren't meant to be solved, and more than 1,000 students left them blank, and of those who tried, most got them wrong, and among the freshmen only 3 got everything right. Those who did were the genius Mei Yuxiong, the mysterious flame, and lastly Beck Usyol. He finds it strange since Beck Usyol had the lowest admission score and didn't solve the other questions. The female teacher asks why he's so interested, and he says that one student's grade doesn't make sense. She smiles and explains that it makes sense since the questions could be solved without knowing any formulas. He asks if she thinks the boy is a genius, but she says it could just be coincidence. He keeps a serious expression and sighs. His record reveals that he was admitted through special consideration because of his blink control skill. The teacher thinks the boy admitted by the headmaster is indeed different from the others. He reflects on a combat mage who specializes in blink, but he decides they'll soon find out whether it was coincidence or if the boy is truly special. The scene changes and we see a group of female students chatting excitedly in the academy hallway. Students rush past commenting that the class list is out and feeling nervous about the results. Beck Usyol complains that he has to check it in person, unlike the game where it was just one click. Everyone gathers around the magical notice board, and one student is left speechless by what he sees. The other students question how Beck Usyol got into Stella with such a low score. He ignores the comments thinking hell, just check his class and leave. He approaches the board thinking that in the end it doesn't really matter. He looks at the list but becomes confused when he can't find his name there. He panics, wondering if he failed for only answering 3 questions. The other students whisper, thinking there must be some mistake with Beck Usyol's name. They compare him to other students who made it into Class A, not understanding the situation. He finds it all very strange and decides he needs to check what's going on. Then he starts walking through the crowd. Suddenly he sees his name somewhere else. On the Class S list. He's stunned, wondering why on earth his name is written there. He can't believe what he's seeing, completely confused by the situation. It's explained that Class S is the Academy's elite group, with only 41 special students. He becomes tense, thinking that being in Class S must be a mistake, and that now he'll meet the main characters. He knows that getting involved with them will shorten his life, and the worst part is he can't change classes. So he decides the best thing to do is to stay as discreet as possible and walks away. He tries to calm down, thinking he'll somehow find a way to handle all of this. Meanwhile, Flame watches him silently from a distance. The scene shifts to where a woman slaps young Hongbin violently. Professor Hong Yeol yells that even Princess Usyol got 2 questions right, but she missed 3. She humiliates the girl, saying she's worse than an insect and should see herself as a beast. With tears in her eyes, Hongbin replies that she understands calling the woman mother. Her mother looks down at her, sighs, and tells her daughter to listen carefully to what she's about to say. Her mother warns that she cannot become a disgrace to the kingdom like her, who was expelled and now works only as a teacher. She approaches her daughter, imposing her authority. Then she grabs the girl's face and demands that she become better than her own sister. The woman gives a very sinister smile. She asks if her daughter understood what she meant, and the girl stands there intimidated. Hongbin answers that of course she does, mother. But alone she thinks she doesn't understand, since she only did what she was taught and still failed. A tear runs down her cheek as she wonders why all of this is happening. With a look of pure anguish, she questions why they're tormenting her like that. The scene shifts, showing the Class classroom with students getting settled. He sits at his desk thinking he's doomed for ending up in a class full of weirdos. The other students whisper, wondering how the hell he managed to get into that class. One student says the parents protested, but the school only replied that Beck Usyol had the qualifications. He gives a small smirk, concluding that apparently he's going to be the class outcast. He understands their frustration but thinks the classes change with each test, so it's fine. He knows Class S isn't an exception, but it's rare for anyone to be demoted from it. Then he remembers that a student from Class A will later move up to S, but decides to think about that later. He finds it amazing to think that those game characters are right there in front of him now. He knows that in a few years most of them will be famous, but about 5 might betray the magical world. And watching Mei Yuxiang smile, the protagonist thinks he's one of those possible traitors. He observes the room in silence. The protagonist thinks it would be good if Flame could prevent that from happening. Suddenly the teacher enters the room and tells everyone to calm down. He formally introduces himself as Lee Hanwol, the class instructor. The students whisper about his reputation, commenting that he has hunted thousands of demonic humans. They call him a 7th-class magic warrior, and he asks for silence again. The teacher comments that there are many talented students and one quite peculiar as well. He explains that the academy trains combat mages and that they'll undergo strict instruction for 3 years. He says he doesn't expect everyone to keep up, but he wants them to give their best during that time. Then he finishes his speech and asks if anyone has questions. The classroom stays silent, waiting for the lesson to begin. The teacher decides to start the class, but Hongbin arrives late. Beck Usyol is surprised, thinking that of all people she's the one who always follows the rules. She stands before the teacher and the protagonist wonders if something happened. To understand better, he decides to use the bauble glasses to check her situation. The window shows her details, but he thinks that's not exactly what he wanted to see. He focuses on the part that says her death is guaranteed, becoming deeply thoughtful. It's explained that she dies because of Flame and Ezel, no matter the game's route. Basically, that's her inevitable fate for being the story's villain. He thinks about saving her but knows he can't, and the teacher tells her to take her seat. He feels bad for her but decides the best thing to do is to keep his distance for now. Suddenly he notices something. Hongbin approaches him with a cold, determined look. He's shocked to see that she sits right beside him. He grows tense, feeling like things are already getting complicated from the start. The teacher announces that before class begins they'll perform the succession of staffs they'll be using. He explains that Class S and A will hold the ceremony together, and Beck Usyol pays attention. He finds it a bit boring but also feels excited to see what's going to happen. It's explained that Stella has 2 major events: the contract with familiars and the succession of staffs. The scene changes to a magical hall, and the teacher asks if everyone has arrived. He explains that there are staffs of various classes there, from the lowest to the highest. Then the teacher says all they need to do is approach a staff and take it. Beck Usyol thinks that in truth it's not they who choose, it's the staffs that choose them. It's explained that in Otherworld staffs only respond to those they deem worthy. In other words, you can't use a high-level staff just because you want to. Beck Usyol begins walking through the hall, wondering which staff he should pick. He thinks that before he would have chosen one for Class F, but now he needs to think carefully since he's Class S. He knows that the staff best suited for his position is the wand, which is divided into 2 classes. Wands are used by the Knight class for quick spells and staffs by the Bishop class for powerful attacks. A student watches Beck Usyol and asks the others which staff they think he'll pick. Another student comments that since he's in Class S there shouldn't be a problem causing a resonance effect, but Beck Usyol ignores them, thinking they can believe whatever they want about him. Suddenly a voice calls out to him and he turns to see who it is. He's met by a taller student with an arrogant expression. The guy introduces himself as Usyol, leaving Beck Usyol confused. The protagonist thinks he's never heard that name before but asks what he wants. Then Usyol asks which staff he's going to choose and Beck Usyol replies that it'll be any one of them with a mocking smile. Usyol tells him to pick a staff that matches his lowborn status. He even warns him not to cause trouble for the teachers and Beck Usyol stays quiet listening. But then he replies that Usyol shouldn't cause trouble either and starts walking away. Usyol turns bright red with pure anger at the response. He gets furious and curses at Beck Usyol, who keeps walking back turned to him. Usyol asks if he's looking for a fight, but Beck Usyol just finds the whole thing annoying. It's revealed that Usyol is just a third-rate bully, the son of a marquise. Beck Usyol is surprised, wondering if that's really all the information there is about him. He's shocked by how much of a background character the guy is, barely believing it. Then Usyol points at his staff and says he's going to take that one, telling Beck Usyol to watch closely. Beck Usyol recognizes the staff immediately. He wonders if that's the famous staff at Murray at Amiri. He concludes that must be a mid-high class staff, the strongest one there. It's explained that mid-high class staffs are meant for professional magic warriors, and the limit for students is mid-low class. Beck Usyol thinks that even professionals barely manage to use mid-low class staffs. He remembers there's another mid-high class staff there, but it's only for display. The teacher instructs everyone to stand in front of the chose. Several students begin taking their staffs, which glow with a blue light. Princess Hongbin also takes a staff which emits a powerful light. Beck Usyol watches the scene, seeing the magical energy spreading throughout the hall. The students are shocked to see that several of them manage to take mid-class staffs. Usyol becomes furious, thinking this year's class is insane for being so strong. He glares at Beck Usyol and says he'll succeed too, full of determination. The students watch as Usyol approaches the strongest staff. They wonder if he's really going to try resonating with a mid-high class staff. With a smug grin, he says he'll show them what a true class's K talent looks like. He tries to take the staff but is repelled by an explosion of purple energy. As expected, he fails to resonate and falls to the ground. Badly injured, the other students panic and shout for a teacher to come quickly. Beck Usyol sighs, thinking that a staff of that level is impossible for him. He thinks it'd be better if Usyol just gave up. The protagonist walks past the fallen guy and tells him to pull himself together, while Mi Yuxiang watches. The protagonist thinks the owner of that staff has already been decided, and we see Mi Yuxiang with it. Mi Yuxiang gives a small confident smirk. The students are surprised to see that he's going to try taking the strongest staff. He approaches the staff and the others comment that not even he could handle that weapon. The boy grabs the staff and an explosion of light and energy fills the hall. Beck Usyol feels the pressure of the energy but observes calmly. Mi Yuxiang smiles, feeling the power of the staff. He grips the weapon firmly, showing that he has mastered it. The other students are shocked, unable to believe a freshman managed to take a staff of that level. One student wonders if that's even possible, but Beck Usyol thinks he already expected it. He knows that now many more people will realize just how talented Mi Yuxiang truly is. Suddenly Mi Yuxiang looks at the protagonist, and Beck Usyol is confused by his reaction. Then Mi Yuxiang flashes a bright, cheerful smile at Beck Usyol. The protagonist wonders what the hell that was, thinking the guy has lost his mind. He remembers that Flame also takes a powerful staff, the Teravan, and that this could split the route if Flame takes the Teravan. Mi Yuxiang will become interested in her because of her talent. That would open Mi Yuxiang's route, but if she chooses another staff, the story changes completely. Beck Usyol thinks he needs to use Flame to bring Mi Yuxiang to their side. He finally spots her. Seeing that she's near the Teravan staff, the protagonist watches the scene, wondering what Flame will do now. Meanwhile, Flame walks slowly toward the staff. Beck Usyol hopes she takes the Teravan. He thinks that way Mi Yuxiang will become interested in her, and with that they'd have a better chance at a happy ending. But then he notices something. Beck Usyol is shocked to see that she's not interested in the Teravan. He panics, wondering if she doesn't know how important that staff is. Then he thinks that's bad, since she should be able to resonate with any staff. He worries that if she picks a strange staff they might lose other good routes. At that point he prepares to act with a determined look. He decides he has no choice but to push the Teravan toward her. He uses blink and appears right beside her. Almost bumping into her, Flame looks at him, surprised by his sudden appearance. She's startled, and he awkwardly greets her, trying to play it off. He says he was just curious about her choice, but she asks why he wants to know. Then he tries to explain, but she cuts him off, saying it's none of his business. Flame turns to leave, and he tries to stop her from walking away. Beck Usyol asks her to wait, trying to buy some time. He grows thoughtful, feeling that something very strange is going on. He remembers that Flame was supposed to be friendly with everyone, so he doesn't understand why she's so cold, but he decides he can't give up. His life depends on this, and he asks her to wait again. He tries to be kind, saying he just wants to help her choose, but Flame tells him to mind his own business still. Beck Usyol insists, saying he feels there's a perfect staff for her there, which irritates her. She suddenly explodes in anger, yelling and asking what the hell he knows about staffs to meddle in her choice. He's completely flustered, wondering if he did something wrong, and ends up saying he's just heard a lot about her. Then he points to the staff, asking if she doesn't think she can grab that one, and she recognizes the Teravan. Beck Usyol confirms that's the one, but suddenly something catches his attention. A strange sound surrounds him, and he's shocked, not understanding what's happening. He feels a strong dizziness, groaning in pain from the sudden discomfort. Frightened, his hand goes straight to the handle of the Teravan staff. As if drawn to it, the protagonist can't believe he's holding the staff, completely in shock. He panics, wondering why the staff is in his hand when Flame was supposed to take it. Beck Usyol curses mentally and tries to cover it up with an awkward smile. Then he calls her name, trying to gauge her reaction, but Flame gives a sinister smile and asks why he did that. Making the atmosphere tense, afraid, he stammers that it's nothing, trying to get out of the situation. He thinks he's completely screwed, and the scene shifts to late afternoon at the academy. Students begin gossiping about the latest events. They comment that 2 students managed to get mid-high class staffs. A historic feat. One of them finds it strange that one of those students only uses blink, a spell many consider trash. Meanwhile, Flame walks alone, ignoring everyone's comments. The scene changes to the Academy study hall. Flame walks down the corridor. Relieved that things have finally quieted down a bit, she thinks that no matter where she goes, this was the only topic of the entire day. The news spread immediately, but she still can't understand what happened. She's shocked, wondering who the hell this guy is who managed to grab the Teravan. The girl remembers that she read the novel 3 times but never saw any character named Beck Usyol. And in the story, no one could ever take the Teravan. Yet it resonated so easily with that guy, as if he was trying to show off to her on purpose. But she decides there's no point in thinking about it now. Suddenly a voice calls her name, and she stops immediately. A blonde girl approaches with her friends, asking if Flame is going to study alone again. Flame smiles kindly. She asks if the girls think she's a nerd, but one of them says she always ends up studying anyway. Then another asks why Flame keeps calling them kids when they're the same age. With an awkward smile, she explains that it's just a habit since she was treated as older where she used to live. She thinks that since she's inside a novel, she can't exactly act like a real teenager. The girl then asks again if she's really going to study alone today. Flame looks at a red-haired girl. Thinking her name must be Jackie, she thinks the girl's style looks similar to hers and says she's heading to a special meeting. Then she says goodbye and walks away while the others plan to go to a cafe next time. As she walks, she sighs, thinking about how girls that age can be. Flame thinks being a student is hard, but she accidentally bumps into someone. From the impact, she hits her head and complains about the pain. A voice calls her, and she's surprised to see it's Hey One Riang. He asks if she's okay, and Flame replies that yes, everything's fine, but he notices her expression doesn't look good and asks if something happened. Flame wonders if he's worried and replies that it's nothing. He asks if she's going to study, and she confirms, asking if he's going to train again. He says there's no room for laziness, and she calls him too serious, but he scolds her. They stare at each other for a moment, and he gives a small smirk. He touches her shoulder and says goodbye, telling her he'll see her later. Flame stands there watching him walk away down the corridor. Then she turns, thinking the conversation was rather dull, but suddenly she stops, feeling something strange. Then she sees Jackie hiding behind a pillar, looking anything but friendly. Surprised, she wonders why Jackie is still there and tries to call her. But the girl runs away. Flame decides that it doesn't matter and that it's not the time to worry about that. With that, she arrives at the study hall for the special meeting. She thinks that according to the novel, Usyol and Hongbin will be there, and it will be important to observe their confrontation. Then she opens the hall door, ready to enter the meeting. She sees Usyol with a serious expression, while the other students seem more cheerful as she walks down the stairs. She thinks that all the important characters are gathered there. She looks around trying to analyze the situation and see who's present. Then she identifies the host as Kyle from Class A, who looks somewhat surprised. She sits down thinking it's normal to see famous people there since it's a meeting to improve grades. With a focused gaze, she keeps observing. Suddenly she's surprised to see that even Ma Yu-seong is there at the meeting. She realizes that Ma Yu-seong is interested in Beck Usyol, and thinks that's no coincidence. She clenches her fist, realizing that Beck Usyol knew that if he solved those 3 questions, he would be able to enter Class S. And we see the protagonist smiling awkwardly. She thinks that if Beck Usyol knew everything, then he's a very dangerous guy. Meanwhile, the protagonist sighs, already tired of the situation. Ma Yu-seong is smiling brightly at him, and Beck Usyol wishes someone would just take him away from there. Ma Yu-seong asks why he came, saying that he doesn't need to listen to this kind of thing. Ma Yu-seong is there for some special reason, but Beck Usyol replies that he has none. The protagonist feels tense and frustrated with the situation. He wonders why the hell Ma Yu-seong is so interested in him all of a sudden. Someone interrupts the conversation, asking everyone to be quiet. Then Kyle announces that today they'll review the problems from the placement exam. He explains that the test had difficult questions, nicknamed the 3 questions of hell. Kyle brags that he solved one of them but inwardly curses having to be there, but he sees it as a chance since he heard that Beck Usyol got the worst score. So he decides he'll show how much better he is by explaining how he solved the question. He starts writing on the board, explaining that the problem was a trap meant to mislead. A student begins taking notes while Kyle prepares to continue. Then Ma Yu-seong turns to Beck Usyol with a small smirk. He quietly asks what Beck Usyol thinks, wanting to know if Kyle is right. Ma Yu-seong smiles, waiting for his classmate's answer. But Beck Usyol panics inside since he doesn't understand anything and doesn't even know which questions they're talking about. With no way out, he decides the best thing to do is just be honest. The protagonist answers that he doesn't think it's right, and Kyle stops speaking immediately. The other students start whispering, realizing that's Beck Usyol. Kyle gets irritated, especially when someone asks if Beck Usyol is saying he's wrong. Beck Usyol is confused, not understanding why everyone's staring at him. Angry, Kyle snaps the chalk he was holding. He directly asks Beck Usyol if he's doing it wrong, making the boy nervous. With a mocking smile, he challenges Beck Usyol to go up and solve the problem himself. The protagonist panics completely, unable to believe what's happening. He stands there paralyzed in pure shock. Then Beck Usyol gives him a thumbs up, and Beck Usyol realizes he did that on purpose. With no other choice, he sighs and decides to go up front to handle the situation. He thinks it's best to just get this over with and walks past the other students. Then he stands in front of the board, facing Kyle and the chalkboard. With the glasses, he thinks about those so-called 3 questions of hell, but he realizes that it's actually more like a riddle quiz. The question gives an example about a mage doubling the amount of earth with a spell. He explains that the answer is simple since if the earth cries, it decomposes. He finds it all ridiculous and wonders who the madman was that came up with those questions. Either way, he looks at Kyle, thinking about what to do next. He thinks that Kyle solved it as if it were math, talking about dividing the soil. He thinks Kyle's method was wrong, but he got the answer right purely by luck. Then he says he can't show the full solution but can explain where Kyle went wrong. Beck Usyol asks what would happen if the problem involved water or wind instead of earth. He asks if the method would still work, and Kyle stammers that he'd use a different approach, but the protagonist says that would mean he'd have to redo everything. Leaving Kyle speechless, he concludes that it was just luck, not the intent of whoever made the exam. Kyle is left speechless, stuttering, unable to answer the argument. Then Kyle admits that he's right, and Beck Usyol worries that he might have shattered his confidence. The two discuss the answers in front of the board. Meanwhile, the other students keep taking notes. Flame watches everything from afar. Shocked by what just happened, she can't believe the other students are writing down what he's saying. She thinks that Usyol and Hongbin should be fighting, but both are focused on the problem. With that, she grows worried, wondering if things are going well. The meeting ends and Ma Usyol says goodbye to Beck Usyol, telling him he'll see him tomorrow. The protagonist just waves back, a bit awkward with the genius farewell. But inside he panics, thinking he never wants to get involved with Ma Usyol again. He sighs, concluding that all of this is probably the staff's fault. He can't even use the weapon, But he's already drawn Beck Usyl's attention and doesn't understand why. Then he sees Hongbin and thinks that besides Flame no one else used that staff. Princess Hongbin stands there wearing a very serious expression. Beck Usyol sees her and wonders if she's waiting for someone there. He decides it's none of his business and tries to walk past her, but suddenly she calls his name, making him stop. Immediately she turns around and says she has something to ask him. He's shocked that Hongbin wants to talk to him and asks what it is. Then she asks why he didn't explain the solution to the problem earlier. He freaks out inside, thinking it's not that he didn't explain. He simply couldn't. He realizes she's misunderstanding everything and says he just didn't have anything to say. She stares at him for a moment and replies that she understands the situation. She concludes that he didn't want to reveal his solution in that setting. He's shocked and tries to deny it, but the princess has already drawn her own conclusions. Then he's surprised when she says that if that's the case, she'll compensate him. He asks what she means and she repeats that she'll reward him fairly. With that, she demands that he explain whatever he has in mind. The protagonist panics inside, unable to believe the mess he's gotten himself into. The scene shifts to a library, where the two sit at a table covered in papers. He says he doesn't understand why she's paying to understand 3 questions, but she tells him to just talk. He points out that she only got those 3 wrong and asks if she's not embarrassed to ask him for help. But she replies no, the only shame is not knowing the answers. She says she'd do anything to find the solution, and he thinks she really sounds like a model student, but he asks why she sought him out specifically for help. He argues that she's a princess and should have friends to ask, but she's left without an answer. Then she explains that among all the freshmen, only 3 people, including him, got the questions right. Beck Usyol is confused, asking what the hell she's talking about. Now she reveals that the questions were impossible trick questions, but Mayu sung Flame and he solved them. With that, she says she's now in a difficult position, and he grows tense, gripping the paper. He's shocked to learn they were trick questions, and she asks if he didn't notice while solving them. All nervous, he thinks back to those crazy problems and finally understands why he's in Class S. And he also realizes why Flame tried to stop him before everything happened. He thinks he didn't know all the world's details, not even about those trick questions. But he knows Flame is different since she read the novel and knows most of the details. Things like the 3 questions that were actually riddles in disguise, but since a background character got involved, Flame had to acknowledge Beck Usyl's existence. The princess asks why he's making that face, and he says it's nothing. The protagonist sits there thinking, processing the new information. He reminds her that she agreed to grant him a request if he helped her with the questions. Then he makes a simple request, asking her to turn his staff into a magic sword. She finds it strange, but he just replies that a sword suits his style better. He thinks he doesn't want to explain that he's crippled and just asks if she'll do it or not. The princess stays silent for a moment, analyzing his request. Then she agrees, saying it'll be easy, and Beck Usyol celebrates inwardly. He then says he'll explain the first question, pointing to the paper on the table. He reveals that the method to solve it is simply a change in perspective. She's confused, asking if it's a change in perspective, and he confirms that it is. It's explained that her weakness is using magic only as written in books without thinking outside the box, and she only realizes this in her 2nd year, after losing badly to Flame in a duel. He thinks he can't give too many hints, but can at least push her in the right direction. Something clicks in his mind, and he leans forward wanting to ask her something. He asks if she knows what a nonsense riddle quiz is. The princess looks completely confused by that random question. She replies that the word riddle isn't unfamiliar to her, and thinks she's heard of it before. To help, he gives an example and asks what's between one knee and one knee. The princess thinks for a moment and answers uncertainly, saying maybe the back of the knee. He immediately denies it, revealing that the correct answer is the word, and, leaving her stunned, he explains that he asked what was between the words, and the princess takes a moment to process it. Then a dark aura bursts from her, and he awkwardly asks her not to look at him like that. He tries to calm the beast, asking her to relax and focus on the test question again. Then he explains that the question includes formulas she doesn't know, so it must be solved with creativity. Then he asks if it would be possible to memorize creativity, and she grows thoughtful at the idea. She concludes that it's not, and Beck Usyol smiles faintly at her answer. The protagonist says that knowing many spells and techniques is indeed very important, and he continues saying that however for a mage, the most important thing is something else. It's to look at the world beyond the limits of thought, since magic grows with the smallest change. He goes on saying that she only thinks of things as she sees them, without going beyond the obvious. Then he explains that spells aren't just about memorizing and casting, leaving her in silence. He admits that she may be better than him in analytical thinking and judgment, but he finishes by saying that she lacks the most important quality of a mage, creativity. He grows tense upon seeing her expression. Thinking that her face looks far too serious, then he awkwardly asks if she understood everything, even though it sounded complicated, but the princess smiles slightly, saying that of course she understood everything. He feels relieved, thinking it's fascinating, since he himself has no idea what he's talking about. Then he says that since she understood they can begin, and he throws the first riddle. She grows pensive as he asks what the man would say to the horse while putting it to sleep. The princess admits that she doesn't know, and he reveals the answer, a pun meaning time to graze. He throws another one, and again she doesn't know, so he explains the joke about beds always lying down. He asks another question about rock, paper, and scissors, and once more she says she doesn't know. With a victorious smile, he explains the final pun. Proud of his own joke, he keeps going with the riddles, but the princess begins trembling in pure anger and frustration. She clenches her fists tightly, trying her best to control the emotions she's feeling. He realizes he overdid it and thinks she's going to explode at any moment. Then he stammers and asks what the cloud said to the ocean. All excited, he repeats the question, wanting to know what the cloud said when it rained. She stays silent, thinking of the answer, while he pleads for her to at least try guessing. Then she replies with another pun, saying that she was getting emotional, leaving him shocked. With a shy look she stammers and confirms that she got the riddle's answer right. Then she smiles beautifully, and he's stunned since it's the first time he's seen her smile. He praises her, saying her creativity is on another level, as expected of a princess. All embarrassed, she says that's enough and asks him to give her the next question. He smiles victoriously, completely satisfied. The scene then shifts to nighttime, showing the academy glowing with lights. Though it's getting dark, there are still many students around. Beck Usyol walks along, somewhat distracted, thinking that he ended up spending 2 hours on those nonsense questions with the princess. He reflects that he can't even believe the things he said, feeling embarrassed just remembering it. The protagonist thinks the princess is an excellent mage but has rigid thinking. He thinks he needs to modify the Teravan into a magic sword, and that he can't do anything about what's already happened. Beck Usyol decides to stop thinking and just go buy the books he needs for class. He wonders if it's this way, as he can't quite remember the location. Suddenly, his eyes focus on a particular spot, and he stops walking. He stops in front of an old wooden building, confirming that he finally found the place. Upon entering, he confirms that the place is quite worn, with shelves full of dust and cobwebs, but he already knew that since he recognizes the hooded figure sitting in the corner. It's explained that the owner has the habit of pretending to sleep while observing customers, and it's in this bookstore that the notes of MANHWA, the best student from 10 years ago, are hidden. He remembers that in the game all he had to do was press a button for the lesson screen to appear, but in real life he needs the textbook, and his grade depends on which one he uses. The protagonist thinks he discovered that the best ones were hidden in secret shops. He thinks that with MANHWA's notes, he's guaranteed to get a perfect score in the magical engineering class. With a focused look, he finally spots the book he was searching for on the shelf. Then he reaches out to grab it, but suddenly another hand reaches for it as well. Surprised, he looks up and is shocked to see that the person is Usyol, who says her name. She asks if he knows her, and he replies that yes, since she's quite famous around here. Then she remembers him, saying that he's from the supplementary group and that his name is Beck Usyol. He's confused, wondering if she doesn't remember meeting him before entering the academy. She comments that she enjoyed the debate but was disappointed that he didn't finish the explanation. Then she says goodbye, saying it was nice meeting him, and leaves. He holds the book, thinking with relief that, fortunately, she didn't take the item with her in the end. Then he wonders why she was there and notices the 78,000 price tag on the book she was looking at. Then Usyol sighs and puts the book back on the shelf, looking quite disappointed. He grows thoughtful, wondering if that was the reason. It's explained that the bookstore sells used books, so only poor students like him come here. That's why Usyol, who lost everything, probably had no other choice but to come here. The scene shows that her father was probably killed by demonic humans. He finds it very sad that a princess like her has to worry about the price of used books. Moreover, Usyol had a tragic ending, dying even before Flame became the protagonist. He concludes that the unluckiest character in the game was without a doubt Usyol. On impulse, he grabs the stack of books from the counter, determined to do something. He goes to the counter and asks to take the books, leaving the owner surprised by the quantity. Beck Usyol turns to Usyol, who stares at him, not understanding his actions. Then she says he seems to have chosen some very interesting topics. He gives a small grin, wondering if she's about to scold him right there. She points out that he's reading about advanced sealing theory. Usyol says that this is a rarely used form of magic. Since alchemy and engineering now dominate, he agrees that it's not a very useful subject. And she confirms that he already knew that, but he answers in a determined tone, saying that's exactly why he's taking it. Usyol is completely shocked by his answer. Not understanding what he means, he smiles and explains that since everyone thinks like her, it's easier to get good grades in that class. He says goodbye, saying hell go ahead, leaving Usyol at the counter looking a bit confused. He thinks that, as Usyol said, few people take that class, so he can get good grades without much effort. With a confident smile, he concludes that, with this strategy, he'll have no problem this semester. Usyol watches him leave in silence. The scene shifts to the second day, and Usyl's first class is about the theory of nullification. She thinks that at least this subject is easy to get good grades in, so it shouldn't be too bad. But upon entering the classroom, she's shocked to see the place packed with students. A student confirms that she enrolled because she heard it was easy, but now the rumors have spread. Usyol finds a seat and hears the girl say she's doomed. With so much competition, she decides there's nothing she can do, and that she'll have to give her best in other classes. The class ends, and the students start leaving, with one complaining about hunger and thinking about lunch. She sighs, worried that with so many people in the class it'll be hard to earn the scholarship. Then she wonders if she should eat something first since she's feeling hungry. She checks her meal tickets and sees she only has 60, so she decides to eat just a piece of bread today. Suddenly she notices someone and wonders if that guy over there isn't Beck Usyol. Usyol is surprised and asks herself what the hell he's doing in that class. She stands still, watching the lesson unfold, and then she notices there are a few students, and all of them have rather questionable grades. Usyol thinks that the class is at risk of being cancelled, and an idea pops into her head. She thinks that if she joins this class, she'll be able to raise her grades without much effort. And with the extra time, she can study other subjects and earn more scholarship money. With a determined look, she seems to have made a decision about what to do. Then she thinks of Beck Usyol, wondering if he already knew this subject was easy. She's shocked, wondering if he planned everything to make his life at the academy easier. The girl stands there processing that possibility, but she shakes her head, telling herself that no, it must just be coincidence. The scene shifts to another class, where the professor says that everyone should know the origin of magic. Professor Layden explains that the white mage spread magic throughout the world. He taught nature magic to the elves and matter magic to the dwarves. The professor explains that humans learned elemental magic, and then the founding mage ascended to the heavens. Beck Usyol feels disheartened, wondering how he'll endure 3 more years of school again. He thinks that going to school at his age is torture, and that in the game he'd just skip it all with a button, but he knows this class is important, as it might hold clues about the so-called true ending. He reflects that this is only his assumption for now. Then he changes the subject in his thoughts, looking at Usyol. He wonders if she's always been in this class. He doesn't remember any main character taking this subject in the game, but he decides that it doesn't matter to him anyway. The professor continues, saying that human curiosity didn't stop at elemental magic. He explains that human mages stole magic from other species but still weren't satisfied. Then he reveals that even so they couldn't learn any more magic. The founding mage then left behind the 12 divine moons and simply disappeared. With that, the professor asks if anyone knows anything about the 12 divine moons. Usyol answers that they were guardians who protected the continent but vanished 1,000 years ago. The professor confirms that she's right and that they had special powers to safeguard the continent. He gives the example of the 6th moon of the red summer, which had a sacred flame that never went out. He says that one can still see the flames in the Alamanca Sea, and Beck Usyol thinks that must be a joke. The professor explains that anyone entering the domain of the Sea King Alamanca would die instantly. He points to the coast of Levian, a whirlpool frozen by the 12th moon of the blue winter. He says that each moon has its own power, but that a miracle would occur if all were ever united. A student then asks what kind of miracle that would be, but the professor admits that in truth no one knows the answer. Beck Usyol thinks that he's right, since they've been dormant for 1,000 years. He remembers finding 5 of them in the game, but only during limited time events. And he only managed that by gathering information from other players. He concludes that if his assumptions are correct, The 12 moons are connected to the true ending. He recalls that he found only 5 after risking his life several times. But he decides that, if he wants to see the true ending, he'll have to do it all over again. The scene shifts to a training dummy being struck by a fiery explosion in the training field. A teacher warns that strength isn't everything. Professor Hongyol explains that a strong attack is useless if it doesn't hit the target. The entire training field bursts into flames. Then someone launches a powerful fire attack at the dummy. The blast explodes with immense force. After the smoke clears, she examines the result. But the training dummy remains intact, without a single scratch. The students are shocked by the sight. She looks at the result and says that it was terrible. Then she calls for Bin, who's standing among the students. The scene shifts to Bin sitting alone, thinking that she showed her mother a scene again. She clenches her fists, thinking that her mother must be deeply disappointed in her. Suddenly a voice calls her princess, and she looks up. A red-haired girl approaches her with a smile. With a gentle tone, the girl asks if she's all right. The girl praises the princess, saying she's amazing, but Bin asks what she means. She explains that her magic was much stronger, but the princess says she couldn't even aim properly. Yet the girl insists that the spell itself was incredible, finding it all super cool. She says she's heard of the princess since childhood, and Bin remembers that the girl is also a fire mage. The princess recalls her name, Arzhuang, and realizes she's heard of her before. It's revealed that Arzhuang is a fire attribute prodigy who appeared out of nowhere. Bin used to think the girl was nothing compared to her, but she compliments Arzhuang's precision. Arzhuang says that if the princess practices more, her power won't even compare to hers. The princess cuts her off, telling her to stop with the nonsense, and turns her back, but she admits that talking with the girl made her feel a little better. Then she says goodbye and leaves, while Arzhuang remains seated on the bench. Arzhuang watches her walk away with a very serious expression. The scene shifts, and the princess lets out a tired sigh. Suddenly, a voice calls her princess, and she looks up. A woman in a suit is standing in the room, waiting for her. The woman is Yai Taran, Princess Hongbin's personal guard. She serves tea and some sweets to the princess, who thanks her for the gesture. The guard informs her that she's already taken care of the request to remodel the staff. She says that since the staff is good, the magic sword will be first-rate. And the princess agrees, but Yai Taran mentions there's something questionable about the staff. Resting her hand on her chin, the guard pauses to think before replying. Then she explains that she heard the staff continuously drains mana from its owner. The princess thinks it's a demonic tool, but the guard says it resonates with nature's energy. The princess is shocked, finding it impossible for a staff to absorb a user's mana and still resonate with nature. She wonders how a trash staff like that could be considered mid-high class. The guard explains that the staff's original ability was to enhance the user's mana, making it high class, but since it drains mana, it was downgraded to mid-high class, leaving the princess astonished. The princess asks how a student could even use such a thing, and the guard admits she's also puzzled. The guard says that only someone with either immense or no mana at all could wield it. She says she doesn't quite understand it, but the commoner will probably manage somehow, and the guard agrees. She takes a sip of tea and remarks that in any case the boy is quite peculiar. The scene shifts to a few days later, at the official start of the semester. In class, the professor says that attack magic must be controlled with more detail than other types. Professor Karlam explains that this is why the mana orbitology course is mandatory. He announces that starting today, they'll study orbitology with a focus on projectile and target. The professor begins writing a formula on the board, preparing to explain the problem. A student complains that of all attributes it had to be water, those without that specialty won't manage. Beck Usyol yawns, finding all of it incredibly boring. He wonders why these classes are harder than language lessons. Suddenly the professor calls on him to solve the problem, and he stands up, cursing under his breath for being caught. A short while later he finishes solving the problem and says he's done. The professor stammers a compliment, saying he solved the equation very simply. He asks if the boy's specialty is water, but Beck Usyol immediately denies it. The professor then ends the class while Azel watches everything in silence. As he's leaving the room, a voice calls out asking to speak with him. Beck Usyol turns around and is surprised to see that it's Azel standing there. She approaches and says she has a question to ask him. The protagonist looks a bit confused, wondering what she wants to ask him. Usyol thinks that regardless of grades Beck Usyol is very intelligent. The girl recalls the protagonist finishing the problem on the board earlier. At that moment she was shocked, thinking there was no way that could have been possible. She thinks that question was at least university level or even something only a professor could solve. She wonders what Beck Usyol's true identity is, even for a genius academy like this. At first she doubted him, but now she's certain he has a strategy for choosing his classes. With that in mind, she decides she must find out his next class no matter what. Beck Usyol is surprised by her question. He asks if she's interested in him, but she replies that's disgusting. He quickly reprimands himself since he's an adult and asks again why she wants to know. She explains that she looked into his schedule and saw that all his classes are easy to get high grades in. With a serious expression, she directly asks where he learned that strategy. He laughs and says he didn't learn it anywhere, that it was just coincidence. Then he says that if that's all, he's leaving, which shocks her with his response. She tries to stop him from leaving, but he keeps walking down the corridor. Desperate, she runs after him and asks him to wait a second. He stops and asks why she followed him, telling her to go learn from someone else. Usyol stammers, and he suggests she just follow what he's been doing since he already researched it. She explains that if she took the same classes as him, it could hurt his grades. Beck Usyol realizes that she's the one who needs the scholarship the most, yet still worries about others. He thinks that although she's annoying, she still acts like the story's true heroine. Then, with a cute expression, she asks him for a recommendation for an easy class, and he asks if she thinks her beauty will convince him. Usyol says that her face usually relieves stress, leaving Beck Usyol in disbelief at what he just heard. She laughs, saying it was a joke, and adds that she prepared some compensation, which makes him curious. Beck Usyol wonders why all young people love offering compensation, thinking they're all arrogant. Then she asks if he knows anything about the ghost story of the Seventh Tower. He confirms that he does, and she's surprised since few people know that story. She explains that it's about an abandoned building that vanished, and that there are several barriers preventing anyone from approaching the place. Usyol grows confused when he tells her to wait, not understanding what he means. Beck Usyol panics, thinking he's going to lose his mind from this situation. He realizes that this is very important information because with it, Flame can greatly increase her affection with the male protagonist. He understands that if Flame knew, then Usyol knew too, and she should have given this information to the protagonist, not to a side character like him. Suddenly he changes the subject, saying the story sounds scary and that he doesn't want to hear it. But she says it's not that scary and asks if he's afraid of ghosts, offering the information for free. Usyol notices he changed his mind quickly, and he replies that he has the right to change his opinion. He continues his train of thought, thinking that it's already enough that Usyol sincerely wants to offer him something. Then he changes the topic, recommending the Abyssal Meditation class, saying it'll be very useful for her. Usyol finds the suggestion odd, asking if he's some kind of cultivator, but he denies it. He tries to explain, saying that his master was a bishop like her and increased her power through meditation. She's surprised and asks if it was only through meditation, and he confirms it. He explains that for bishops with large-scale destructive magic, meditation is extremely important because precise control comes from the mind, which is what moves mana in the end. He says he's only telling her this because she's cute, but she reminds him that he once called her ugly. She thanks him and decides to enroll even if it doesn't help her grades. Usyol turns and leaves, leaving Beck Usyol alone with his thoughts. He admits that it's a bit scary to think about how this might change the future, but he knows that if he abandons her out of fear, Usyol will meet a tragic end in this life as well. He hopes that meditation will help her, but suddenly he gets an idea. Realizing that he's also a mage, he wonders why he hasn't thought about training until now. He remembers that in the game, Beck Usyol trained his body rigorously and grew tremendously. He thinks about training directly, since things have been slow and he hasn't gained any experience lately. With a smile, he concludes that he should be grateful to Usyol for giving him the idea. Arriving at his room, he comments on how the dormitory is really big. The scene shows that in Stella, all students live in the academy's dormitories. He remembers that in the game, the dorms were just an extra feature, but now they're his only home. The dorms are divided by class, and the number of roommates changes depending on the tier. Class S occupies the upper floors, and he thinks he'll finally use the space for something worthwhile. He settles in and prepares himself, saying to himself that he'll start his training now. He understands that stats aren't everything, because in reality he needs to adapt to this body in the game. Beck Usyol was a genius who manifested sword aura using the infinite flow of mana. No one paid attention to him, but he was a master swordsman, and now he needs to walk that path again. He focuses on his breathing to control mana, planning to gradually increase the amount he absorbs. Skills don't level up just through experience, they need to be trained and used constantly, and so time passes as he trains. Suddenly he feels something, realizing it's the same feedback the Beck Usyol from the game would have. He looks at his hands and can feel the mana, even if it's faint, something he had already accepted. Then two windows appear, notifying that his mana syndrome and blink have leveled up. He celebrates, feeling that he's now one step closer to his goal. The scene shifts to a field, and he reinforces his determination to find the true ending. Flame walks through the area, noticing how everything feels real, even though it's made of magic. It's explained that the Stella Dome is a subdimension used for events, training, and even dungeons. She observes the gathered students, counting a total of 141 people in the area. Flame calculates the class numbers, realizing that class has 41 students, 2 more than in the novel. She's shocked to understand that Beck Usyol also existed in the original story and wasn't a variable. She calms down, thinking she'll figure things out gradually. Since she's the only one who knows the novel, she walks across the field, thinking the class should start soon. Suddenly she hears a voice asking young Master Jeremy if he's done registering. He confirms that he is, and his friends say they signed up for the same class as him. With a radiant smile, he says that's great and that they'll have fun together. Then it's explained that this is Prince Jeremy. In the novel he was obsessed with Azel, but after being rejected he became a villain. Flame thinks he seems kind, but all his actions are calculated, so it's best to stay away. The prince keeps smiling and waving. Even so, she admits that he's very handsome and understands why so many people flatter him. She thinks that Prince Jeremy's group is probably the most attention-grabbing one in the entire school. She decides to pull herself together because now that this world is her reality, she must prepare for the future. But as she walks away, the prince watches her and thinks her name, recognizing her. A professor arrives, calling for attention and announcing that they'll conduct a training exercise to evaluate everyone's level. He introduces himself as the one in charge of the training and tells them to keep their complaints to themselves. He reminds them that teachers can give or take points, and that low grades lead to expulsion. Then he explains that the training will take place in a simulated dungeon with real traps and monsters. He details the points: 4 for level 1 monsters, 8 for level 2, and 20 for whoever gets the point staff. The top 5 will earn rewards and anyone with 0 will have their points deducted. He allows them to form teams but warns that points will be divided among the members. The professor adds that whoever defeats another student will take their points, and then the environment begins to change. Suddenly the ground transforms and the students panic, not understanding what's happening. Everyone screams as the environment collapses entirely, throwing them in all directions. Flame recognizes the place, realizing they're in the map of Jack and the Beanstalk. The field becomes a massive magical forest with students scattered throughout the new setting. She decides she has to move as well and gets ready to start training with her staff, but suddenly a voice calls her name, making her stop walking. Jackie approaches and asks if she's going to do the practical training alone. Flame thinks it's better to go solo to earn more points and says she'll try that this time. Jackie says she understands, but Flame thinks her tone sounded a bit sarcastic. Flame agrees to go with her next time and Jackie answers with a simple okay. As she walks away, Flame gets the impression that the girl is somehow imitating her. She ignores the feeling, thinking maybe it's just a phase the girl is going through. An hour later, a water spell hits the target. Flame takes a deep breath, finding the training exhausting and wondering when this damn thing will end. Suddenly she notices something and vines begin attacking her from all sides. She quickly casts a magic barrier to protect herself from the surprise attack. The vines are repelled by her defense. She realizes that it's not just the monsters the field itself attacks. Proving Stella's training is serious. She thinks she's already gathered 18 points, which isn't bad, but a single point staff could make a huge difference. She decides she needs to keep moving through the forest. Suddenly she stops, sensing a strange presence nearby. A silhouette appears against the light, and she wonders if it's a monster. But she realizes it's a person and is shocked by how well he's hiding his presence. She calms down, remembering that she's also concealing her presence through nature. With her specialties, she thinks an ambush would be a good move. She gets closer to strike, but she's completely shocked when she sees who it is. She can't believe that the person there is Beck Usyol. She watches him wondering if he's also wandering around alone. She remembers that he rejected everyone who wanted to form a team and can't understand what he's thinking. She's stunned to see that he's already obtained a point staff. With a serious expression, she thinks this is the perfect chance. She decides to test that man preparing a cluster of light. She channels the magic into her staff. She calculates that at 15 meters away, he won't be able to defend in time with the magic circle activated. She gets ready, then she fires a powerful light bullet toward him. The attack flies fast, but he notices it at the last second. He uses his blink ability and disappears in the blink of an eye. Flame is completely shocked, not understanding what just happened. She stands still, utterly confused, with her hand trembling. She wonders how he did that. She can't comprehend how he dodged a second-class spell from that distance. Meanwhile, Beck Usyol uses blink to escape. He's startled, thinking she tried to kill him, and is thankful his syndrome leveled up. The window shows that his blink now has a range of 12 meters. He thinks that, with 2 blinks remaining, the best choice is to simply avoid confrontation with her. So he uses both blinks at once to get as far away as possible. Feeling safe at a distance, he reminds himself that his goal is 5th place. There's no need to take risks. The reward for 5th place is the ethereal roots, which increase life and strength. He figures the protagonist will take the top spots and that he only needs 3 more staffs. Suddenly he stops as he notices someone's presence speaking to him. A group of students appears and the leader recognizes him as Beck Usyol from Class S. Beck Usyol stares back, trying to remember him. The group looks down on him and the blonde repeats that he's the famous Beck Usyol. He finally recognizes him. He recalls that this is Raiden, a guy who recently became popular at school. He also remembers that Raiden is one of Prince Jeremy's sycophants. He ignores the provocation, focusing on something else. And he's shocked to see that the guy already has 3-point staffs in his hand. One of them comments that he heard Beck Usyol is a loser who cheated his way into Class S. Raiden mocks him, saying Stella has really gone downhill, and Beck Usyol thinks they never get tired of repeating the same thing. Raiden turns toward him, drawing his attention. With an arrogant smile, he demands that Beck Usyol hand over his point staff. Beck Usyol refuses, and Raiden is surprised, asking if he's resisting. With a wicked grin, he keeps provoking him. He asks if Beck Usyol thinks he can face them alone. Beck Usyol wonders what to do, and Raiden says he can't even use magic, much less his staff. He knows that with a first-class blink it would be tough to face a noble-born mage even with 3 blinks. But he remembers he has one variable in his favor, the point staff in his hand. And he also takes into account that their current location is a dungeon. With a smile, he offers the point staff, telling them to take it. Raiden grins, saying that's more like it, but the moment he steps closer, Beck Usyol attacks with absurd speed. Raiden freezes in confusion as Beck Usyol smiles confidently. He lands the hit, but a magic barrier activates at the last second. Furious, Raiden curses the damned commoner who dared to attack him. Even with the barrier, the impact throws him backward, consumed by rage. He screams that hell destroy Beck Usyol, but when he looks, Beck Usyol has already vanished, leaving him wondering where he went. Raiden is completely stunned by what just happened. From afar, Beck Usyol reappears, remarking that that was close. With a victorious grin, he thanks them for the staffs he just stole. Raiden yells in fury for him to give them back, but Beck Usyol flatly refuses. He thinks about how efficient the point staffs are, something he discovered by accident in the game. It's explained that the staffs are a bugged item with the durability of a magic tool. And for Beck Usyol, who fights physically, they're a weapon with 100 attack power. Raiden is outraged, unable to believe that bastard dared to steal his staffs. He shouts for his group to attack, but suddenly the dungeon itself begins attacking them. Annoyed, he orders everyone to prepare their magic and not lose sight of Beck Usyol. Taking advantage of the distraction, Beck Usyol flees, and one of the guys yells that he's escaping. They fire spells, but Beck Usyol is too fast and dodges everything. The protagonist realizes they're stronger than he expected, and Raiden rages at seeing him get away. They lose sight of him, but Beck Usyol thinks using the terrain to his advantage is easy with his experience. Raiden grows frustrated, but one of his friends warns him about the dungeon. He orders everyone to calm down, saying to attack the protagonist the moment they see him, and he warns them to be careful, because if the spell misfires there will be magical backlash. Suddenly Beck Usyol appears behind one of them and strikes. The boy screams in pain as his magic goes out of control. He yells "damn it" as the magic explodes, hitting everyone around him. The magical rebound explodes, striking Raiden's entire group at once. Beck Usyol watches from a distance, declaring that the fight is over. Raiden curses Beck Usyol and he takes the chance to grab the last point staff. He shows the staffs, thinking he might give them as a gift to some girl. Later Raiden screams for him to give them back, but Beck Usyol says it was fun and walks away. He disappears, leaving Raiden stammering from afar. A white-haired girl watches the scene in silence. Beck Usyol celebrates, saying that he hit the jackpot. He thinks that in a normal fight he would have been robbed, but in a dungeon, things are different. But suddenly he stops, sensing a strange presence coming from somewhere. He turns, asking where that feeling is coming from. Suddenly a massive explosion of fire rushes toward him. The wave of fire keeps coming at full force. In disbelief, he curses at the intensity of the magic. The massive explosion destroys everything in its path. He narrowly escapes, breathing in relief. Looking at the destruction, he thinks this is a big problem, but he recognizes that spell and a silhouette emerges through the smoke. A voice calls him a commoner and a figure approaches him. It's Hongbin, and she asks why he didn't take the rest of their staffs too. Beck Usyol is shocked to see it's Hongbin. He can't believe it, wondering what the hell she's doing here. He tries to explain himself, but then asks what this has to do with her. The princess stays silent and he gets irritated by her attitude. He accuses her of waiting for him to defeat everyone so she could steal the staffs, but she declares herself of royal blood, leaving him indignant at her arrogance. And she challenges him, saying that if he's aware of that, then he can come at her. Then she says she'll defeat him fairly, since taking items from a commoner isn't worthy of royalty. Beck Usyol mocks her dignity, asking if she enjoys stealing from the weak. She says she saw him toying with those bastards from the start of the fight. She notices that he didn't even use magic and thinks she needs to hurry to earn points. The scene rewinds a bit, showing the princess hearing voices nearby. She sees Raiden's group shouting that Beck Usyol is escaping and asking where he went. She understands what's going on. She watches the fight between Beck Usyol and Raiden's group. She thinks about attacking, but decides that facing 6 people alone would be too difficult, so she decides to wait until the fight ends to grab all the staffs at once. But she's shocked to see the commoner attacking Raiden unexpectedly. She realizes he's not using any magic other than blink. She thinks they're weak but still elites, so Beck Usyol is strong enough to toy with them. Now she decides she needs to use her power to burn him completely. The princess launches a powerful wave of fire in his direction. The massive fire attack surges forward rapidly, but Beck Usyol manages to dodge at the last second, throwing himself to the ground. Hongbin watches him with a cold, calculating gaze. He stands up, thinking that, as expected of her, that attack was extremely dangerous. Beck Usyol thinks that using 2 blinks to dodge is difficult and that there must be another way to beat her. Then she provokes him, asking if he's not going to grab his staff to fight. He replies that she took his staff, but she's referring to the basic staff he got at the start. Beck Usyol remembers the staff but says he completely forgot about it since he wouldn't use it anyway. She says he's joking. As always, the princess thinks she's desperate, but that brainless commoner always acts like everything's a joke. She says she doesn't know about the other losers, but it'd be nice if he fought her seriously. He thinks that he's always been serious but simply can't use magic. Then she summons massive power, making his eyes widen. The princess threatens that she'll really kill him if he doesn't fight seriously. The fire begins to spread across the entire battlefield. She's determined, thinking she'll definitely crush that commoner today. The fire attack surrounds him from all sides, leaving no escape. He braces for the impact, feeling the intense heat of the explosion. Suddenly something comes to his mind as the flames get closer and closer. He thinks that even with blink the attack's area is too wide to escape. As he wonders what to do, he hears a strange and familiar sound. He turns and sees a path he can use to escape. Without wasting time, he decides that's his only option. Without thinking twice, he uses blink and teleports in that direction. The fiery explosion consumes the spot where he stood a second ago. He looks back, thinking he got lucky, but now things are about to get tougher. He knows the flames around her will explode if he gets too close. He learned that the hard way, losing several PvPs against fire mages in the game. Beck Usyol acknowledges that she's much stronger than she seems. Watching from a distance, he thinks that if they were on flat terrain he would have finished her in a minute. He corrects himself, thinking that wouldn't even count as a valid fight in the first place. The protagonist finds himself surrounded by flames as multiple attacks fly toward him, but he grips the point staffs, wondering if she really thinks he'll just stand there doing nothing. He dodges the attack, and a second later the spot explodes. Amid the flames, more attacks fly toward him. Suddenly his eyes shine with a blue light, showing that he has a plan amid the chaos of the attacks. Beck Usyol thinks he can see the incoming strike. Then he uses his blink to dodge the spells with impressive agility. With a precise movement he swings his staff and deflects the powerful fire magic. Hongbin can't believe it, wondering how he managed to use a weapon to repel magic. She watches from afar, questioning whether that's even possible to do. Her senses fade for a moment. This isn't a game, it's a real confrontation. But the sensation is so vivid, as if he can truly feel the flow of mana through his hands. She doesn't understand how he's managing it, since the forest terrain should give her the advantage. So she decides she needs to use an even stronger spell to finally defeat him. But he keeps deflecting her magic perfectly, though he's clearly straining himself. Beck Usyol thinks he can't just stay on defense. He needs to destroy her magic shield. Amid the flames he dashes through the battlefield, dodging the attacks with agility. He realizes that this is the perfect moment to act. Then he uses blink, appearing right in front of Hongbin. Hongbin flinches at his sudden approach. Furious, she casts flight or crash, a close combat fire spell. He explains that this spell creates a knockback effect on anyone nearby, but he already has experience with it and endures the impact of the spell. Hongbin is surprised as he slides across the ground and closes the distance. He strikes her, and she defends herself with a shield. Hongbin gasps in shock, saying it can't be, as her shield begins to crack. With one final hit, he completely shatters her defense. She's thrown backward by the force of the impact. Then he sits down in front of her and says that he's won. She looks at him with an expression of anger and humiliation. She asks who he is, but he replies that he's just a normal student. Then he changes the subject, glancing over his shoulder and spotting a silhouette hidden nearby. He says aloud for the person hiding to come out. Flame steps out from behind a tree, and he recognizes her by name. She denies hiding and asks how he knew she was there. He smiles and says it was just a hunch, though he knows it was his sixth sense. Flame ponders that for a moment, repeating to herself that it was just a hunch. But she questions how he broke a magic field using a training staff. She asks if that was also just a hunch, leaving him speechless. He thinks that this bug didn't exist in the novel, and he can't tell her the truth. He tries to play it off, saying the staff is durable, but she confronts him about its limits. She asks why normal knights disappeared, and he realizes she's right. Flame says she already thought he was strange before, but now she's sure. She stares at him seriously and asks again who he really is. He stays silent while Hongbin also watches him, waiting for an answer. He thinks that the situation has escalated this far in less than a month. He wonders if he should reveal his identity, but decides it's far too dangerous. Then he tells Flame that he might seem suspicious, but he's not a bad person to her. She asks what that means, and he replies that he only wants to help her. Flame is confused, wondering who he thinks he is to want to help her. He decides to leave, saying he doesn't have time to explain any further. But as he turns away, Hongbin throws the staffs at him, hitting his head. He freezes, and she seems surprised that she actually managed to hit him. He complains, but she says she thought he'd dodge it like he does with magic. He feels embarrassed, thinking his sixth sense has limits, and that it really hurt. He explains that his mental energy is depleted and asks why she threw the staffs back. He wonders if it's her pride, but thinks that taking all of them would raise his ranking too much, so he decides to take only one staff. He smiles and says hell, just take one, and that she can keep the rest. With that, he says goodbye and walks away. He thinks to himself that being kind to a defeated opponent is really cool. Flame asks if he's an idiot, and Hongbin suggests he lacks common sense. Hongbin grows pensive, reflecting on Beck Usyol's true identity. The scene shifts to a control room, where three people observe a holographic map. The hologram shows Ma Yuzong fighting one of the men. Comments that this year's class says students are incredible. Elder Telex says it was worth coming to watch, and Jarina and agrees that it's entertaining. The professor thinks that many big names came just to watch the new students. He reflects that they have to attend if they want to recruit talented individuals, and that other professors are likely watching too. Suddenly, he notices something on the screen and is shocked by what he sees. He realizes that Hei Wonring and Ma Yuzong have finally encountered each other in the dungeon. The two begin to fight, trading magical strikes with their swords. Ma Yuzong conjures multiple magic circles, displaying his superior skill. The observers are amazed, wondering how he can use third-rank power at only 17. The professor thinks that ordinary mages usually reach that level after 20, yet Ma Yuzong already can. Another says he really can't believe what he's seeing. He's shocked to realize that both students possess 3 magical elements. The professor thinks that most mages have only one element, and with intense training they might acquire two. But having 3 or more elements is a talent one is born with. Suddenly, a loud sound startles the man, and he wonders what that is. A giant bird appears, and he realizes it's a hidden boss from the dungeon. The monster lets out a deafening screech and charges at the two. Ma Yuzong and Hei Wonring are caught off guard by the boss' sudden appearance, but before it can attack, the bird is frozen and then destroyed by a lightning strike. At that moment, Ezelmalf appears, and asks if they were in the middle of a fight. She apologizes for interrupting their duel. Looking genuinely sorry, the professor in the control room recognizes the girl, recalling her name. Ma Yuzong thinks that hidden bosses are rare and difficult to find and defeat, and he's impressed that she managed to hunt down such a monster alone. Elder Telex comments that she's the traitor's daughter, and what a shame that is, but suddenly he notices another battle on the screen, recognizing Princess Hongbin. He wonders who she's fighting against, but then he recognizes the spell being used, and in shock he realizes that the boy is using Blink to dodge the attacks. And that's how we end the first part of this video. If you want the continuation, comment Blink Boy, that way YouTube will recommend our video to more people. See you next time, everyone.